Hello everyone and welcome to the class of Principles of Microeconomics Econ 111. This is lecture number 18 and in this lecture we are going to discuss about the production function and the cost. It is in continuation to our previous lecture where we discussed about the cost and the marginal cost concepts. Before starting with the concept of the production and its relationship with its cost, let us discuss what a firm basically does. A firm basically produces goods and services, and when they produces more goods and services, the cost of production increases. When they produce lesser goods and services, the cost of goods decreases. But this relationship is not straightforward. That is, it doesn't mean that if a firm is producing 10 units and it costs 100 rupees, then when they are producing 20 units, it will cost 200. No, this relationship is not in such a linear format. So in order to understand that, we also need to understand a production function. The production function basically shows the relationship between the quantity of inputs that a firm uses, and we relate that to the quantity of out. Production function basically is the relationship between the quantity of inputs and the quantity of output of a specific good. Let us explore this concept a little more. There are certain concepts related to it. One is the marginal product. What is marginal product? Basically, marginal product means that the marginal product of an input in the production process is the increase in the output that arises from an additional unit of that input. In simple words, when we add input by 1 unit, how much change in the overall production occurs? That is the marginal production. Let me use a small example here. For example, a firm is producing 100 units and has hired 5 labor. Then when they hire a 6th labor, the production rises to 120. So how much change has occurred because of an increase in 1 unit of labor? That is 20. So the marginal product here is 20. Here is a detailed example, a table that can explain us what the marginal product is and how it is calculated. In the first column, we have the number of workers, and this is the input, right? So when we increase the labor, the output definitely will change. So here we have, when we have 0 workers, there is no output because nothing is being produced. But when we hire 1 labor, the output is 50. Then we hire another labor, the output is 90. When third labor, the output is 120. When we hire the 4th labor, the output is 140. For 5th, it is 150, and for 6th, it is 155. What you see here is that when we were hiring 0 workers, there was no production. But with the first worker, the output was 50. So how much is the difference? The difference between these two is 50. So the marginal productivity of the first labor is 50. Then what we do next is we add another labor. From 1 we move to the second labor. And how much change does this makes in the overall output? From 50 we get to 90. So 90 minus 50, when we subtract 50 from the 90, what we get is 40. Similarly, for the third labor, we have 120 minus 90, that is equivalent to 30. and for the fourth it is 20. We continue this exact process, and in the last, when we have when we hire 6 labor, the output changes from 150 to 155. So additional 5 units are reduced with the last labor. What you need to see here is the marginal productivity of labor was 50, then 40, then 30, then 20, 10, and 5. So there is a persistent decline in the marginal productivity of labor. Why is this so? This is usually because when we have two types of inputs, one is labor and the other, let's say, that is capital, or let's say that is land, and we keep the land or the capital fixed, an additional labor will not will have the same resources as the first labor. So each incremental labor use the same resource, and hence they do not have because the resources does not include along with them, their marginal productivity declines. Imagine that there is a single labor who is producing 50 units, and he has a single wheelbarrow, and when an additional labor comes, both of them use a single wheelbarrow, so the second labor may wait for his turn. Then increasing a third labor, he may wait for his turn, and so on, until we have 6 labors and one wheelbarrow. So the sixth labor will be waiting for his turn, and he will be producing lesser and lesser of the quantity. So that is the main idea, that when we increase one factor of production while keeping other factors of production constant, the marginal productivity of that single factor will always be declining. Now, what about the cost? How do we relate the marginal productivity to the cost? You see the cost of the factory. Let's say that is the rent that you are paying each month for the land and the factory that you are using. So that remains the same, whatever labor we are hiring, cost of the factory is not changing. If you have 6 laborers, you still have to pay the same amount of rent. If you have 1 labor, you still have to pay the same amount of rent. Even if you are producing nothing, look at these number of workers is 0, the quantity is 0, but still you are paying the cost of factory as $30. So that is independent of the amount of production, that is fixed. You are paying that if you are producing or not. Then the cost of the workers. The cost of the worker, because you are hiring 0 labor, you are paying nothing. But let's say that a single laborer has a wage rate of $10. When you hire 1 labor, the cost is 10. When you hire a second labor, the cost is 20. When you hire a third labor, the cost is 30. 4 labor, you are paying $40. And when you have hired 6 laborers, you are paying $60. And when you have hired 10 laborers, you will be paying $100. So that increase equally with the amount of labor. What you need to understand here is that when you hire more and more labor, the productivity declines, but the cost does not. And the total cost in this case is calculated as uh, cost of the factory plus cost of workers. So 30 plus 0 is equal to 30. 30 plus 10 is equal to 40. 30 plus 20 is equal to 50, and so on. So cost is increasing incrementally by 10. Cost has been increasing by 10 in all cases, whereas the output is not increasing by 10, it is increasing by 50, then by 40, then by 30, then by 20, then by 10, and then by 5. Output is declining and the cost is, so cost per output if you see the cost per output, that is going to increase. For a single quantity, this cost is going to increase, but let us discuss that in the subsequent slides. Till now, this concept, we can see that we can understand this table now. So let us graph this table and see how the marginal productivity. Let us graph these two things. Let me identify them with a different marker. The number of workers and the marginal productivity of labor. How will the graph of these two develop? Let us see that. So the production function, let us explain these properties. The diminishing marginal product, we have seen that the marginal product was diminishing. The more and more labor we hired, lesser was the output. Um, the concept is the diminishing marginal product is a concept in which the marginal product of an output declines as the quantity of the input rises, and we have seen that in our example. Here is another example to understand. As more and more workers are hired, each additional worker contributes less and less to the production because the firm has limited amount of equipment. And in our example, we said that he has a limited amount, that was the wheelbarrow, a single wheelbarrow for a large number of workers. Or you can also imagine that there is a bakery or there is a kitchen. In that kitchen, there is a single stove and there is one cook cooking with that stove. He will be producing 10 bread. But if you include a second cook, and because the store is still there is still a single store, they will be producing a total of not 20 but 18 bread, because they will be waiting for their turn. And let us fill this kitchen with 10 cooks, so you will see that at least 3 or 4 will be chatting with each other and they will not be producing anything. So that is the basic concept. If you want the output to rise with the input, you'll have to raise the input equivalently. You will have more kitchen and more store available to them so that they can produce more and more. So as I discussed earlier, we have the number of workers hired, and we write that on the x-axis, and the quantity of output, the production, on the y-axis. And we graph that. This is the graph. You see I'm plotting all of these dots, and the first, when we had 0 workers, we had 0 output. With the first worker, we were producing 50 units. Then with the second worker, we were producing 90 units. Then with the third worker, we were producing 120 units, and so on. And you see that this is not a straight graph. A straight graph would look like this, right? So the production function is not straight, and it is neither increasing with labor. If it was increasing with labor, it would have an upward trend, rather than the output declines as the labor is increasing. This is the marginal productivity. For the first labor, the marginal productivity is 50, and then we had the second labor, the marginal productivity is 90 minus 50, that is 40. For the third, the marginal productivity at this point is 120 minus 90, that is equivalent to 30, and then 20, then 10, and then there is slight increase with the sixth worker, that is 5. And maybe if you extend more with the seventh worker, there may not be an increase in the output. So this is the marginal productivity of labor. Now, the production function, the property is that it has a diminishing marginal product, and we understand what a diminishing marginal product is. The slope of the production function measures the marginal product of an input, such as worker, and we have done that. We have seen how the marginal productivity of labor was diminishing with each additional labor that we were hiring. Then when the marginal product declines, the production function becomes flatter. At the very top, again, if you see at the very top, it becomes very flat. Here at this point, the production becomes very flat, whereas in the beginning, it is not flat, it is always increasing. So marginal productivity becomes flatter as more and more input is added. Now, how does this production function relates with the cost? Uh, as I explained previously, the relationship between the quantity of firm, between the quantity of firm can produce and its costs determines the pricing decision. And how? Let us see that. The total cost curve shows the relationship graphically. We look at the same table, the number of workers that are increasing from 0 to 6. Then the quantity of cookies produced, this is the production, the output. Then we also calculated the marginal product that was declining. Then we added the total cost, and we had the result as 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and that cost is increasing with each unit of labor. But when we compare that with the quantity, the cost is increasing with each unit of labor, but when we relate that directly with the quantity, the cost is also increasing with each unit of output that is produced. And the graph of this will be definitely an upward sloping. Here is the graph. We graph the total cost on the y-axis and the output on the left axis, and see when we were producing 0 units, the total cost was 30. Why was 30? Because that was the fixed cost we were still paying for the factory. When we were producing 50 units, the cost was equivalent to 40. Then when we were producing 90 units, the cost was equivalent to 50, and so on. So when you see the overall graph, you see that it is not a straight line, it is in fact turning upward. That means as the more and more quantity you produce, the higher will be the cost. The cost is increasing with each unit. The first unit is cheaper, the second unit is slightly expensive, and the last unit is the most expensive. The marginal cost is increasing in such scenarios. Then we end this lecture with the summary that the total cost is upward sloping, whereas the production function is diminishing. So both of them are interrelated, and they are interrelated in the sense that because of the slope, the downward sloping or the diminishing slope of the production function, the cost function is sloping upward, because with each unit the cost is increasing, and they both are somehow the same thing. It is these are, we can say, that two sides of the same picture. Then afterwards, we will in the next class discuss about the other types of cost, that includes the fixed cost and the variable cost. After the discussion on the fixed and variable cost, we will further discuss their averages and see how their averages affect the overall cost and especially the slope of the average total cost that is dependent on the average variable cost and average fixed cost. So hope till now you have understood these concepts, and if you have any questions, please do ask in the comment section. Thank you very much.